Yeah, so my name is Neil. I think I'm probably somewhere mentally 22 years old, although sadly I'm probably 2.5 times that. I'm married to Julie, and we have, hopefully, 4 children, which was not my idea. And yes, the food bill is simply horrendous. I love downhill mountain biking and skiing on my third ACL, my sixth knee operation. But in my spare time, I'm the director of pediatric intensive care and anesthetics, although my background is actually I'm a pediatrician. I know I'm wearing a Rafa top cycling, which is the sort of the rite of passage for all cyclists and anesthetists. However, so about, let's think, about 3 decades ago, John Senders, psychologist, got a whole group of people together, including medics, and asked us, he said, you know what, are you doing safety correctly? Are you thinking about this? Of course we are. We think about it all the time, and you're going, are you sure? Because, errors in medicine and the adverse events that may follow are problems of psychology and engineering, and not of medicine. And what he was telling us there was that actually if you put good people into bad systems, you will get adverse outcomes.
What would Oprah do?
Hang it all. What's the point? It's a disaster.
Stop! Don't do it! That button launches all of our nuclear missiles!
Well, then which button gets me a latte?
That would be the other one, sir.
What idiot designed this thing?
You did, sir.
Fair enough. Wilson, fire somebody.
Yes, sir, Mr. President.
So many years ago, nearly 100 years ago, Heinrich came up with this. So a lot of sort of risk and safety came from looking at events that happened and the insurance companies that were paying out for it. And he's quite right, the apparent cause is not always the basic cause. So what we took with it from medics was that 89% of accidents, incidents, call it what you will, well, actually the workers are the root cause. And they are the root cause because they were involved in the accident or incident and they chose purposely to carry out an unsafe act or make a mistake. And it's really interesting, that term, making a mistake. It's as if you actively made a mistake knowing you were making a mistake. But in fact, Marianne Paget, a sociologist, and it's sociologists who really know about safety because they know about people. Mistakes happen all the time, and the vast majority of them doesn't work. But an act is not a mistake. Actually, it becomes mistaken. And yet mistakes in healthcare are not tolerated. And this is Albert Wu's first paper on the second victim phenomenon. Came out about 2 decades ago. So 2 things about it. One, it could have been written yesterday. So has anything actually changed? And secondly, it was part of a series of editorials that were in the BMJ. And the guest editors on the editorials were none other than Lucien Leap and Don Berwick. So pediatric surgeon, pediatrician, fathers of the IHI, Institute for Health Improvement. But who would have thought that actually aiming for quality improvement as your sole method of making safety better, so aiming for zero, reducing variability, dissecting people through data, counting errors, and restricting people and constraining people's capacity so they don't do something that is wrong, could actually lead to anxiety, worry, further down the line, and increase the second victim phenomenon. So who could have thought that? Well, I bet you Eric Honagle knew that, and he knew that 20 years before Albert Wu's paper, when he wrote his paper on human error. I love Eric Honagle. I've got such a man crush on him. I mean, and he is like a tall Yoda. He's so clever and funny. So the organizers have provided us with both stimulating and irritating list of questions. He's quite right. Why and how can people be blamed for something which at that time, in that context, with their training, made perfect sense to them? And if it made perfect sense to them at that time, it's likely to make perfect sense to others further down the line. It's interesting how we're using this term human error more and more in society and in healthcare. We can even quantify it. Oh, it's simple human error. Really, what scale were you using? But if you ask the sort of human factors guys that are around the world, they don't really know what it means, but they know what it infers if you bring the words human and error together in the name of safety. We, of course, don't help in healthcare because we use tired, knackered consultants and nurses with no time or training and use an elderly tool that was probably conceived in the Industrial Revolution, and then we are asked to go and find the single cause of this issue and then implement a raft of measures so it never happens again. Even though, weirdly, most of the time, it's never happened before. So I was first sort of exposed to incident reporting by Dave. So Dave was one of the guys in the original unit that I was in, the intensive care unit in Glasgow. And he's a consultant cardiac anaesthetist. He's retired now. Massive abdomen, which used to arrive about 10 minutes before the rest of him. And he smoked like a laboratory beagle. I mean, he was unbelievable. But he was the first guy who came along and said, you know what, there's this wee postbox thing. You write a little thing on a bit of paper. Oops, tie it all up, put it in, we'll chat about it further down the line. And so 4 to 6 weeks, we would go in a wee room round the back, lashings of tea, cake, discuss them. We would talk about the incident. We wouldn't write anything down. There would be no action plans. We would finish our tea and go back to work. I thought, well, what was the point in that? I need to know an answer. And so society needs to know. We need to know now, and we're such an always-on sort of society that, in fact, what we normally do now is we post-rationalize, we find what we're looking for. The most familiar thing when we look retrospectively must be true, and we compress complexity and we construct a reason rather than actually finding one. And one of the biggest influences, which people are really realizing, is that one of the biggest influences to the investigating team is that the investigating team have the one piece of information that the team at the time didn't, which is the outcome. And this came out when I was 5. So, I mean, it's a really interesting paper, and they talked about dividing it into several groups of people. Some knew the outcome, some didn't. But the people who knew the outcome vastly overestimated what the team should have done at the time of the incident and what they would have done at the time of the incident. And then that sort of outcome and cause then gets sort of distorted and amplified and then disseminated, and then instantly it becomes the truth. And we were warned about this at that meeting 3 decades ago. 3 things. 1, don't go into patient safety alone. We're here to help. Sociologists, psychologists, human factors engineers, ergonomists, etc., etc. Don't use QI in isolation because it's a rough tool and you can't really dissect an entire person through data. And whatever you do, do not use human error as your barometer of how safe you are or how useful your program is. And what did we do? So Bob Weir's, as God rest his soul, is absolutely right. The patient safety program, to a certain extent, has hit the buffers. The amount of investment we're putting into it is not commensurate with what we're getting out of it. There are pockets of successes, but the worry is that we are creating issues and counting errors. And error is a symptom. It is actually not a cause. We have created enormous departments in every hospital looking for errors. And it's staffed by people who have not come through sort of a safety science background, and certainly in the NHS it is. Matt Scanlon, who's an intensivist in Milwaukee, and Ken Catchpole, who works in hospitals and is human factors. Whereas the use of non-experts to provide clinical care would be viewed as negligence, today's use of non-experts in patient safety is the standard. And as my dad said, my dear boy, you cannot protocolize the unique. Another guideline, another protocol, another sort of thing which you won't read but have to, which is designed for average, and none of our patients are average, particularly in intensive care. And you get worry and anxiety when you deviate off the beaten track. And there's a lot of sort of thought about the patient safety thing, and is it actually just a form of control? Is it a form of social control, particularly when it comes to safety culture? Does anybody know where the term safety culture came from? So it's first used about 86 when there was the Nuclear Standard Board agency published its recommendations and findings on Chernobyl. And they came up and they said there was a poor safety culture, much to the utter astonishment of social anthropologists who had been studying culture forever. And it's fascinating, if you look at it, and they're probably right, what it does is it can actually, social culture or safety culture is generated by the C-suite, the management, not the cleaners, who have to comply to it. And then what it does is it deviates the gaze away from what actually happened. What was the actual accident? What was the incident? Takes it away from the structural issues that maybe contributed to it and forwards the gaze onto the people at the front line. So no structural money issues have to be implemented because we've already found the cause. And it turns out the only thing we control is the way that we adapt. because we selectively and subjectively take superficial information and we apply it to an instant that we were remote from. We put 2 and 2 together and we make 5, and we blame the person most proximal to the instant in time and space. And hurrah, we have found the cause. It was human error. We can quantify it. It was simple. Our social anxiety can abate. Thank fuck, it wasn't me. We can then, the management, can take total control for it, and any sort of meaningful change that involves time, money, or structure stops dead. Yep, it was Peter Brindley. It always is. Maybe we just need more protocols and guidelines. Okay, now fingers crossed, we've got some sound here.
You look at a lot of the procedures and policies that we follow. Well, we don't follow them because they don't work, is particularly in this environment. It is the most chaotic, complex environment in an emergency department.
And so we are wasting 15% of our time doing something that is of no clinical value.
Because it came from National, why should they be telling us how to do our job and how to do it safely? And they didn't know what they were talking about because they'd never worked in store.
In order to control people, you tell them what to do through procedures, through trainings, through surveillance, through reminders, through punitive measures.
Somebody's failed to follow procedure, we need more procedures. And we need to punish the person or counsel the person for not following the procedure.
What some of them have even done is declare a war on human error, and they try to stamp out individual human errors, and they try to manage the minutiae of their workers' behaviors and their acts and into the capillaries of their daily existence to try to manage and adjust and control everything that they do.
Why? Why? Why are we doing this? It just makes them crazy, and we go crazy.
And it makes us feel shame because we take responsibility for things that we have been kind of pressurized to do, to deviate off the path because it didn't work and it went wrong, or to keep on the path and it went wrong when we knew what we were doing was incorrect. But it was safer for us to do rather than the patient. So it turns out that nuclear industry has got a lot to answer for. And there was another nuclear disaster in 1979, and this is in 3 Mile Island. So what happened was there was a boiler which had a steam-water interface, so it had slack in the system, and it had resilience, it had capacity to adapt. Through various things, it went solid. So solid with water, no slack in the system, no capacity to adapt, number of reactor 2 melted. Everyone got blamed for it, but they were the ones that sorted it out. So for the people who, there's a handy plaque here, tells you what the problem was. Oh, good Lord, there we are. Anyway, so turns out that the investigation team were brilliant. So they had sociologists, psychologists, engineers, no medics were asked for their opinion, strangely. And one of the guys was Charles Perrow. And he was developing his normal accident theory. And this is sort of fascinating. And he was saying what we do is we create accidents because in complex system, we bring parts of the system together that have never been together before. We can't test it. We can't mitigate for it. So further down the line, something happens. So he likens it that you make a coffee machine, brand new coffee machine, you switch it on, makes coffee, but at the same time, it causes a fire in another part of the building and switches the fire alarm off. So technological disasters can no longer be ascribed to an isolated equipment malfunction, operator, or error. So you get these things which just come out of the blue, which are unexpected, incomprehensible, uncontrollable, and unavoidable. And we have created these. And it's partly because we create interdependencies which are tightly coupled. So interdependency is part of this system that comes together, and one can now affect the other. Tightly coupled, the effect is instantaneous, so that before you know it, it's off. The fire is on and the alarm has finished. And if you look at it sort of slightly graphically, it may be in a hospital, so you've got people, IT, hospital tools, and then you've got the natural resonance of your system. But then you bring things together, you change things, you add a new protocol. Maybe you combine a ward, and then you create something which combines in a completely unpredictable, unforeseen way, creates an instant, an accident, or whatever, with somebody inevitably standing beside it, looking utterly baffled. And then it does what the system always does, which is just immediately move on. And we look back with our high-fidelity root cause analysis, and guess what? We can't find something, so we compress complexity and invent a reason. And I think the thing is that nothing needs to break for your system to break. we can actually create things which can cause safety issues. And a lot of it is just due to the increasing complexities. Eric Honagle said somewhere between 1955 and 1980, man and woman no longer knew what they were doing, because the world is too complex for us to understand. And the best sort of description of it, the phenomena which emerges, remember that word, from a collection of interacting objects all competing for some kind of limited resource. So imagine a junction and lots of cars in a car, a jam. You could never create that, it just emerges. And the emergence phenomenon is something which is, the something is greater than the sum of its parts. So emergence is, it is other than the sum of its parts. The constituents that you have got, you just couldn't imagine them combining and causing what they caused. So it's unexpected, unavoidable, And we try to reduce variety using patient safety program. But as Ross Ashby said, one of the fathers of cybernetics, how things used, between IT and people, how the sort of feedback mechanisms occur and how they self-regulate. He says, only a variety can actually absorb variety. And the variety in our system is provided by people. So this is Richard Cook's How Complex System Failed. And it's great, it's 4 pages, ideal for the daft dyslexic laddie from the remote highlands of Scotland. But number 17, people continuously create safety. And it kind of leads into Eric Honagle's idea of work is imagined versus work is done. I imagine I know what you do. And I go, well, no, actually, that's not what we do. This is work is done. This is actually what I do. And as Matt again says, policies and rules are often premised on work as imagined, and thus unrealistic, untenable, and completely unworkable. So I could say, so hello, my name is work as imagined. And I can see where this error has come through, and mistake, through all these big errors that you have created, and the incident has happened, and that's a bit of a shame, but don't worry, I'm here to help. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to block off a couple of these holes, maybe the ones in the top right-hand corner, and I'm going to put a few more barriers in. I have some individual craft, individual slices to hand. I will put them in, and then I will declare you safe from an office about 3/4 of a mile away. And you're going, well, hold on a minute. I'm not supposed to walk about, am I? Because I'm on TV. Hello. That's not our world. You clearly haven't read the paper. It's not static. It's not linear. If you were to come down to our world, work is done, you would find it's like this. The bits of cheese are constantly moving about all over the place. Things are opening and closing. Those aren't errors. Those are defects in the system, and they alter, and we know how to cope with them. And even if we don't cope with them, if you have enough staff and what have you, then we're quite happy to be malleable. But if you shout at us, if you have a new protocol that doesn't work, we haven't got enough staff, or you've asked us to use a new machine with inadequate training, then guess who is standing beside the blue pill when the incident occurs? And it's not you. And I think what's interesting is that whenever something happens, and we ask this question, why has this happened? And that's a good question to ask, and we should continue to ask that question. But the other supplementary question is, well, why has this never happened before? What has happened to the last 10 years? The same structure, the same people, it's never happened before, yet it happened today. And so I was worried about this. I thought, well, maybe as a vague leader, I am creating conditions which makes it unable for the staff at the front line to be malleable, to cope, often subconsciously. So I spoke to Gail, who is the high queen of nursing in PICU a few years ago. And I said, can I do this? And she goes, yep, you can do that. One critical incident, however, and I will kill you. I will resuscitate you very badly, and I will kill you again. And I went, excellent. So the following week, I was promoted from PICU consultant to PICU nurse. So this is me and my pinny. That's Jenna in the middle, who's my preceptor, and Elaine, who was on the who looks like she's plugged in, was on the unit that day in charge. Anyway, so I have felt humbled. I felt fortunate. I made my first mistake within 6 minutes. I overread a chest drain by about 100 mils. Now, in a 3-kilogram baby, that's the fine line between taking the drain out and cracking the chest. And I was amazed at Jenna's capacity to sort out this single ventricle physiology child with one hand and me, inept consultant, with the other. And what was really fascinating was the ward round arrived at a time of their choosing, not ours, set 4 goals and buggered off. For some considerable amount of time, I must say. Came back later on that evening at a time of their choosing, not ours. How many goals did you get? 3. It's a pity about that fourth goal, isn't it, that you didn't achieve. And I'm going, oh, hang on a minute. You haven't been here to see the 200 goals that just popped out every 5 minutes and were effortlessly dealt with by Jenna and the team. And we could have done 250 goals had you not set a ridiculous, unachievable fourth one, which you've now concentrated on. It really was a remarkable shift. It was one of my best days, and I would recommend everybody, medics doing nursing shift, and I know who you are because the blood is draining out your faces. And it's interesting how we spend all of our time in healthcare sorting things out which are incredibly rare. Things that actually go wrong very, very infrequently. And in fact, James Reason, in a closed Airbus meeting in 2006, and Eric Hodagle told me this, he says the CEO just about fell off his chair. He says, do you know what? I think the cheese has had its day. Because nobody's actually read the paper, nobody's looking at why the grey pills are being stopped, why the invisible pills, which you can't see, are not being coming through and causing incidents. So all models are useful, but this one turns out to have had its day. But we wouldn't have gone to where we are now, had it not been for this one, because he was actually talking about, a lot of it was about success. And maybe there's a different way that we could be looking at, in addition to what goes wrong. And most of the answers to healthcare lie outside healthcare. And these guys who do sort of resilient engineering stuff are very switched on and just way ahead of us.
You can either invest in trying to preventing a specific type of event going wrong, which is what we normally do in safety and risk management. But you could also say that the opposite of something going wrong is that it goes well. And you can try and invest in something going well, because if it goes well, it doesn't go wrong at the same time. But if it goes well, it also increases productivity and efficiency and maybe quality and a lot of other things. So your investment is not an investment to prevent something from going wrong. It's an investment in the functioning of the system of the organization. So it's a positive investment. It's not a cost.
So if it's going well, it cannot go wrong at the same time. So he's wondering whether, and many of us are thinking, has safety per se had its day? Because if you put patients first, then you put your staff second. And you constrain staff to do things in order to put the patient at the front line. And maybe looking at your system could then have a byproduct of safety, efficiency, well-being, etc. So he talks about safety one, and Peter touched on this yesterday, looking at why things went wrong. And it's a good question, and we could continue to ask that. But you could ask the supplementary question, well, why has it never gone wrong before? The issue is, though, that it assumes if you find out what's wrong and then control for that, then it assumes that preventing failure will have no effect on normal practice. Actually, sometimes it could make it more difficult. So he talks about safety too, and we should be doing both. Looks at all events, and the best term of definition is why things went well, why they went wrong in the setting of what normally works. And it's the normal bit which I think is so important. It's trying to look at what is normal. Why did nothing happen today? I mean, lots of things happen when you're at work, but why did nothing happen? You can switch off, you can cycle home, you can make the tea, you can meet your mates for a pint. Looking at actually what's normal. Because with quality improvement, we're obsessed with this bit. We've had a special calls, we've had a deviation, the whole place is up in arms, you're getting emails galore, how did this happen? And everybody said, well, nobody's looking at this bit when it doesn't happen, and then you're not looking at the natural resonance of your system, which is so important, and why is nothing happening today? And if you look at studies that have looked at normal work, they say that if they looked at work without incidents, normal work, you actually find the same factors identified in incident reports. So the origins of success and failure are actually the same, but the conditions of work have allowed something to happen which has never happened before. And so the thing is, can you actually find out how work works in order to amplify the good, maybe reduce the bad, so before it's actually too late? And I like the idea of, the people within the system have got all the answers. The answers are actually in the room. And I like asset-based community design because everyone in the unit that I work in has a gift, everybody has a skill, and everybody has a passion, which they have and I don't. But I need in order to make the unit function because they can see things, so differently. It's interesting, if you look at some leaders, none of whom are perfect, especially this guy, who led, Manchester United, Alex Ferguson. It's often just the little subtle social skills that could make a big difference.
He had this unbelievable ability of remembering everyone's name. Obviously, he knows Kath from reception and the laundry girls and the chefs and the cleaners. You've got 65, 70 players. You've got to remember all the names. Plus the schoolboys, that's another 30 or 40. He knew all the names because he took an interest in what they were doing and how they were progressing. He was the top man, and if he's doing it, then everyone else should be doing it as well.
Everyone loved him there in the club. He invited everyone to come for a lunch, for a cup of tea, English cup of tea. So it was a family. It was a family with him.
And leaders often forget that, right? That it's just as much about the ladies doing the laundry and making sure that they're happy as it is about making sure that Cristiano Ronaldo is having a great day.
So do you know the name of your cleaner in the place you work? And one thing about them that is not healthcare related? Because if it wasn't for Phyllis or the porters, the unit we work in would be shut today. So when I did my cleaning shift, that was really interesting. I had my penny on, my gloves, my Titan sanitizer. Quite the young man about town. But I got a superpower, which I was quite unexpectedly, came upon me. But sadly, it was the superpower of invisibility. Because people that I had worked with for years, so surgeons, anaesthetists, pediatricians, visiting, whatever, they all came into the unit, and I was doing the railings, and all of them walked straight past me. And the only thing I said to them is what all these valued healthcare guys say to me and us all the time, is they take one step forward and say, "I'm sorry, I'm in your way." So I'm now trying to sort of foster on the unit a bit more situational dependence, so words and deeds that invite contribution. Trying to sort of foster that two-way feedback mechanism. And as I've changed my ward rounds at night when I go around at night in the 4 bed bays, and I've changed it to, well, not to how are these children attached to a ventilator or an ECMO circuit. It's speaking to the nurses and say, well, how are your children? What's going on in your life? Who are you actually? What are your skills, gifts, and passions? And with that, I find that I actually don't need to talk about the patient at all. If there's something that's up, they'll tell me. And it's really interesting. It takes a long time to sort of do that, and it's been great seeing some of the nurses come through the unit. And so this is Nikki on this side and Christina on the other. And Nikki was 25 weeks pregnant there. This was 10 years ago. And this is them 2 weeks ago. So Nikki is now charged the unit, and Christina is now a significantly brilliant advanced nurse practitioner. And I thought that this was psychological safety. Smiley, happy, will tell you everything, tra-la-la, isn't life just great? But it's not. This is psychological safety. They're pissed off with you. You've cocked up so badly, and they're just saying, what exactly was that about? But they can come and tell you when they're angry and cross. And as Carl says, a guy from New Zealand, it's the quality of the conversation you can have whilst remaining friends. So the new view of safety, there's kind of 4 pillars. It's not the absence of an accident, rather the provision of capacity. Remember, the boiler went solid, nothing could be done. How do we get that steam-water interface? Then, people don't create the problem, but they are actually the problem solvers. Don't constrain people because no 2 days are the same. And when I come to work, I know 2 things: A, where it is, and B, my start time. That's it, and yet we are constrained on things that might potentially go wrong. Now, there's one more, so just before you take a photo, to work safely, ask them what they need to enhance system performance, and safety will then come thereafter. And crucially, safety actually doesn't prevent accidents from happening. How do we ensure good things happening whilst allowing people to adapt in complex, unique systems? And I think a lot of it is, thinking about how do we tolerate uncertainty. This is a brilliant paper from Arabella Simkin, who was in the States and is now back in Oxford. Uncertainty is a given. Certainty is an absolute illusion. And we live in this dynamic, complex world. And what we need to be doing is just trying to make sure that people with expertise and experience can, willingly and happily implement a plan B, a workaround, and in order to manage surprise. There's only one thing that we kind of truly know about our system, and that is at some point it's going to do something that we hadn't thought of. And things that never happened before, well, do you know what? They happen all the time. So when I came back from Vancouver, having done my fellowship there as a consultant, I was standing beside this ECMO patient who was just sick and sick and sick, and I just didn't know what to do. So I spoke to Dave, and I said, well, I could do this, a combination thereof, or my particular favourite, all of the above. And Dave went, do you know what? I'm going to go and check the weather, which is a secret code that we all knew, which is going out the back for probably about 45 cigarettes. He's amazing. One breath. Anyway, so he came back half an hour later and he goes, okay, so what's happened? And I went, do you know what? Nothing. And he goes, I'll see you in the critical incident meeting. And then the penny dropped. I suddenly realized that he wasn't going to have enough information to make any difference. He wasn't going to have anything to sort of boil the ocean. He knew that if he made a sort of decision on not enough information, it would be problematic further down the line. That wasn't what he was doing. What he was doing was creating the capacity for the thing that needs to be safe, which is the two-way safe mechanisms for people at the front line to feed back to each other. So if you have cocked up, which I did 3 days later, and I could have got away with it, but I didn't. I went to Dave and said, I've done this. And I always say to people, there are 3 decisions that you can make as a consultant. 1, nothing at all because you're paralyzed, you don't have enough information. 2, you then do everything. But the third is the one that you need the most amount of information for, and that is the active decision to do nothing. And that's what Dave had, and that's what he taught me. Because he knew, fine, he'd been to the bloody nurse, 10 minutes before I had, and they'd had a wee chat, and he said, that's fine, just let them, we'll just, let them sweat for half an hour. And maybe I'm terrible at statistics, absolutely crap. I don't even know what a P number is, but it doesn't really matter in pediatric intensive care, because when you've got your studies, N equals 4.5 million, we've got N equals like 3. Anyway, how do you measure nothing happening? That's the next sort of deal. So coming towards the end of the talk now. So David Woods, who's an ergonomist in the States, said, resources are finite, but change and surprise never stops. And a lot of the juniors come to me and said, I want to be perfect. I think I'm just good enough. I'm managing, and I want to strive for perfection. And I go, no. You're a perfectionist at the moment, and that's not what you want to be, because it's too constraining, it's too tight. You can't actually be spontaneous. You can't be malleable. What you need to strive for is go from perfection to good enough. That will allow you to have much better sort of reliability in your system, invite conversation, and adapt to the ever-changing conditions of work. So if you actually read Heinrich's paper further down the line, he said, people aren't actually the root cause. People are, in fact, the root remedy. And it's people that are so important in our society. And PICU in your society, it is like a society, like an ecosystem. And I love this from Peter and Matt about, intensive care medicine has always been about caring for people in crisis. And right now, that includes the staff. How do you connect with people to get the best amount of information that you need in order to make a decision with an outcome in mind, but recognizing it might not be the decision that you get? And that's okay. And I'll leave you with a quote from Andrew's dad. So Andrew was 14. He came up to us with terrible endocarditis of his aortic valve. Many operations, ECMO, all the inotropes in the cupboard. And one night I was there, I was on night shift, and he was intubated, paralyzed, many drugs, blah, 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 on an oscillator because his lungs were a bit knackered. We still use such things in pediatric intensive care. And 10 o'clock, they did what they always did. Parents got up, went home. I mean, you could set your watch by it. It was almost as accurate as Swiss trains. And I said to them, how do you manage to do that? At 10 o'clock every night, you just go down and it's to Crosshouse, which is 30 miles down the road. What makes you feel safe to leave? And he goes, well, it's not the way you interact with the machines at the bedside that makes us feel safe. Actually, it's the way that you interact with each other. All right, thanks for your time.